Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to, once again, another episode of World Warship with CS. I guess this episode is going to be something new. Maybe it's a little unusual. I believe this is actually the first episode of ranked gameplay in Warships I have ever produced and uploaded so far. Also, this season ranked gameplay showcases arguably different matchmaking and different tiers of ships.
General quarters.
I believe if you make it past rank 15, you're pretty much only allowed to run tier 8 ships, which is quite different than how things used to be before. I believe originally in previous seasons, people start playing ranked with tier 5s and 6s, and they move on to 6s and 7s. 8s don't show up until much later, I believe. And I guess as a disclaimer, if you will, the highlight or the purpose of this gameplay, or much rather this replay, as well as this video, is not really to only showcase tactic or to demonstrate the performance of the hardware, aka the ships in question, but much rather, this is also to present, if not publicize,
Sighted on the horizon.
certain incidents and phenomena that are ongoing within the player base and the culture of the community that's becoming quite a serious problem. You'll see why. So going back to the matchmaker, it seems to be, at least in design and as an attempt, I guess, becoming more balanced than how it used to be before. In that, you seems to have an equal number of not only the same tier of ships, but also the same class of ships or type of ships that are matched against each other on both sides of the equation. So, 3 battleship versus 3 battleships, 3 cruiser versus 3 cruisers, 1 destroyer versus 1 destroyer. In previous seasons ranked, those numbers could all be unbalanced. You could end up with 2 battleships versus like 3 or 4 on the other side. Same thing goes for cruisers and destroyers. And we all know that's going to be a problem because battleships are much better HP sinks and they have an insane alpha strike. Meanwhile, cruisers, AA and how spammy they are, and their ability to start fire and to counter destroyers is also quite a big deal. So it's arguable that that's one of the reasons why the previous seasons were, I guess, kind of ridiculous, if you will. Another first about this replay is the fact that I am actually playing my North Carolina, which is a tier 8 American battleship. Historically, it was a pretty successful design. It's well-armed and well-armored, fast, not cruiser fast, but not much slower than cruisers. The AA is fantastic in real life, and it's equally fantastic in-game. Unfortunately, in this game, it's mostly useless because the enemy did not come with the aircraft carrier, if you will. The armament of the North Carolina is kind of interesting in that it features 945 caliber, 16-inch or 406mm guns or naval rifles. They elite they are capable of firing a 2,700-pound capped armor-piercing shell that's considered super heavy. And this is both in game and as in real life. Historically, this type of projectile is noted for essentially having the best armor-piercing performance of any naval shell in existence, except for perhaps the 80-incher shells found on the Yamato class. But obviously Yamato paid a very heavy penalty to be able to carry those weapons for being huge and relatively slow. Of course, probably for the sake of game balance and for the sake of game mechanics, such a good hard stats of these weapons are somewhat compensated for by the fact that they have somewhat questionable RNG. Their accuracy is so-so, it's not great. So sometimes in order to reliably hit enemies, you might have to tactically relocate yourself to a closer position to engage in enemies in hopes for better RNG and accuracy, if you will. Another thing to notice about these weapons is the fact that because of the heavy weight of the projectiles themselves, their muzzle velocity is relatively slow. If you check the stats, shells leave the barrel of these guns at barely 700 meters per second, versus the 800 to 900 meters per second velocity at the muzzle that you tend to see on other battleships. So that means, when you're shooting at an enemy, you have to lead. You have to give more lead.
Concentrate fire on the designated target.
And this is highly problematic when you're shooting at a high speed and very maneuverable enemy target, such as a cruiser or, God forbid, a destroyer. In a sense, that problem is kind of exacerbated by the fact that the guns in North Carolina have excellent range. I believe my ship right now still have the stock fire control module, but even still, you can hit enemies at close to 25 kilometers. So essentially, in that situation, because of the poor accuracy and the slow muzzle velocity, you will essentially already have a decent chance of hitting an enemy if they're not maneuvering, if they're going in a straight line, and hopefully if they're a bigger target. But a nice trade-off about those traits is the fact that even though you are not so likely to hit enemies in comparison to how things would be if you were sailing a different battleship, but much rather, you might also have a better chance at penetrating and citadeling enemies, simply because your slower shells take such a high trajectory to the enemy. By the time the shells hit the enemy, they're essentially coming down from a very high angle.
The ship is on fire.
As some people might know, the deck armor for many ships are thinner and more vulnerable than their belt armor. As a testament to that concept and the theory, I can tell you the North Carolina is actually the only ship I own and I have played that have scored citadel hits on Yamato class battleships. And interestingly enough, it tends to happen when you're engaging the enemy at very long range, 17, 18 kilometers plus. It comes straight down. The Yamato is a big target, and it goes right through. Anyways, I digress. So, going back to the gameplay right now, it seems that my team is quite indecisive, and also the teammate seems to be pretty passive. they are essentially doing the classical hiding from a safe distance and hoping that, you know, teammates can do enough damage to beat down the enemy before they come into farm, as well as, you know, using the teammates as HP sink as well as punching bag, if not a meat shield, to absorb enemy damage. Meanwhile, they get to enjoy relative safety. But the catch is that, you know, despite the relative safety, they're not able to effectively engage an enemy because the shooting is poor and they're also too far away and positioned in the wrong locations to make a meaningful difference. And they have been so passive, so much so that essentially every single time I'm slightly closer to the enemy, or much rather I have become, you know, perhaps more vulnerable to enemy gunfire, I essentially got shot up on the spot.
The ship is on fire!
At this point, pretty much I have taken enough hits that I decided, you know,
Enemy battleship destroyed.
continuing such an aggressive engagement will be highly dangerous. And not to mention it will be futile also, just simply because the friendlies aren't willing and able to take advantage of any aggressive move I might take. Or first I might make, if you will. Another thing to notice right now is the fact that the enemy Amagi is shooting a high explosive at me. And the reason why he's doing that is because I'm angling really well, and the North Carolina has very solid armor. A 12-inch or 300mm main armor belt on the citadel sides that kind of slant and angle downward, which make them even more effective. And also the deck armor on the North Carolina is solid. You know, it is arguable that, you know, historically, the North Carolina as well as the South Dakota are probably the best treaty battleships in existence. Hypothetically, against high caliber hits, they are probably more durable than the Bismarcks, the Litolios, obviously, arguably the KGVs. Of course, those ships aren't in the game yet, but it'll be interesting when they are. Unfortunately, right now, the enemy Amagi is angling well, so I'm not able to do much damage to him. Perhaps at this point I should have been spamming HE, but then, you know, I felt that perhaps I was at a range far enough that I can possibly score a good counter fire hit. And Amagi being a modernized design from the 1920s, that kind of takes up some of the traits of vintage World War I designs, arguably have inferior deck armor. And if the model of the ship is properly represented in game, then it's likely that it follows the Japanese practice of up-armoring the deck by multi-layering it, rather than having a much more effective and thicker monolithic layer the Americans and British are doing at this point in history. But I guess once again I digress. I don't think, a lot of people are into history lessons here, but I mean, I read about that kind of stuff. Maybe that's one of the reasons why I got into the game. It's unfortunate, but ultimately unavoidable that, me talking about history will never be as sexy as, Jingo's talking about history. The guy's ex-Royal Navy, plus he's British. That's quite a big deal nowadays.
Battle ends in 5 minutes.
And as you can see right there, the enemy Amagi kind of presented his flat sides to me, and I timed the salvo just right. But as you can see, the North Carolina doesn't really have favorable RNG, so you kind of scatter a little bit. No citadels, nothing too big. And just like that, my entire team derped himself to death. And as I've spoken before, various times, that in situations like this or in game modes like this, destroyers are very important for that. They can provide scouting and vision and spotting for the team, without making themselves vulnerable, because they have good camo and they're agile, they're small, and they can lay a smoke screen. But the rest of my team are at the bottom of the ocean right now, so I'm down to myself. I have taken a crap load of damage, and I have used up all 4 shots of my repair. And I have 4 shots instead of 3 shots because I have the tier 3 captain skill. Superintendent, I believe. And the problem right now is the enemies have better camo, so they are able to do damage to me, but I couldn't spot them and do damage to them in return. And worse yet, they can essentially have one ship that's closer to me, that's providing vision. Meanwhile, other ships can open fire and expose themselves.
The ship is on fire!
Meanwhile, their spotter ally can still remain in relative safety. And also, as a battleship, I have no means to effectively maneuver away or escape from the cruisers if they're not stupid. Not to mention, I'm being swarmed, overwhelmed on all sides, so I couldn't really maneuver or angle properly. Well, so that's that. I find it to be really sad and frustrating. Ultimately, in warfare, it's important to have a sense of responsibility and to hold everybody accountable. Your allies, your brothers in arms, are relying on you for their survival and for victory. There's just simply no room for apathy, incompetence, irresponsibility, ignorance, fucking narcissism, if you will. As you can see, I have done essentially 40k damage on each and all 3 of the heaviest enemy units. I didn't simply farm the easy damage, but I was trying to do my job. But ultimately, the whole thing was so ridiculous and shameful and despicable and frustrating and sickening that, being killed in the end was really relief, was really an easy way out. I think if anybody from Wargaming is watching this video, perhaps they should think about why things have become like this.